ladies and gentlemen, it is always a great pleasure and honor for me to welcome our next guest to the program. She is, in my estimation, the Uber blogger of the Uber blog Hullabaloo, Digby, also known in some circles as Heather Parton. Hello, Digby. How are you?
Good morning, Sam. I'm fine.
You got to say, I asked Digby when I got her on. I said, "How you doing?" And you have to tell me how you perceived your experience with the debate last night.
Well, I said, that it was, considering the baton death march of the Republican debate last night, I'm surviving. I mean, these do require a lot of drinking, and that was a good 5 hours last night. So, I'm not as young as I used to be, and I don't have quite the alcohol tolerance I once had. And last night, really, I mean, it definitely challenged me, I'll tell you.
I have to say that in this studio, we did live coverage for the 3-hour marathon. I didn't realize it was going to be 3 hours. And by the end, I thought that Michael was going to vomit all over his computer. He was so drunk. He was slurring his words. It was pretty...
It might be overshooting there a little bit.
I may be exaggerating just slightly, but not much. And it was, all right, let's just start with the kids' table debate briefly, because there were two things that occurred to me about it. One was, initially I thought, oh, this is where you want to be, because you're going to have the opportunity to talk, which I have a new theory on after watching it. And the other one is that nobody paid attention to it at all.
Well, the same thing happened last time, although, Carly also emerged from the last one as a winner, which she did. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But the early debate last night was actually not bad, I thought. I mean, I watched the whole thing. I mean, as these, kids' table debates go, they seem to be a little bit looser than they were the first time. Maybe it's the lack of Jim Gilmore, who really made them all uptight. They couldn't in the first one. But, once again, what it does show is that when they really have a chance to talk about what they want to talk about and aren't being guided by moderators into areas that they don't really want to go, they talk about foreign policy. And what they're saying is, virtually across the board, that they want to pretty much invade the Middle East on day one. This is what everybody wants to do on day one. And they are, completely paranoid about being invaded here by Middle Eastern terrorists. Lindsey Graham being the guy, of course, who leads the way on that. And he was in fine form last night. I mean, he really, he was, they're coming to kill us in our beds if we don't do something, and the day that I take office will be the day that we, essentially launch World War III. And everybody was kind of nodding along, like that makes perfect sense. I mean, it's really, they're almost casual about it at this point. And I'm sure, if you look at what they were saying, with some exceptions in the big debate, it's pretty much the same thing. I mean, this is a very horrifying thing, and yet it's considered to be just kind of, normal mainstream Republican rhetoric now. I mean, I don't think anybody thinks, they think Donald Trump is extreme when he talks about the wall and deporting all the immigrants, which of course it is. But this stuff is just, hey, the standard Republican rhetoric now. I mean, we're invading and just that's the way it's going to go. And everybody's applauding and kind of, oh, isn't that great? It's I find it extremely disturbing, but they don't seem to be. No, but and certainly the media doesn't seem to care. They never say a word about this.
Well, there's a couple of examples of that. I mean, what is, I was saying this morning that if a Martian had dropped down and just the first thing that Martian did was to go to those first two debates, they would assume that outside of that pristine Reagan library, the world was on fire. Like that literally there was like a dystopia they were describing that, and Lindsey Graham, yes, I mean, basically saying that, look, off the coast of this state, there are ships, just teeming with ISIS members who are ready to bust through our lines to pave way for the Iranians, who are also about to invade this country. I mean, and what's also amazing is they talk about this like America as if it's this dystopic place, but no economic issues come up. No, there's not one. I mean, I was really struck by that, particularly in the big debate, because it was a 3-hour debate. And I would say like 2.5 hours seemed to be dedicated to the question, like vaguely these questions of security. It was very strange in that respect. But let's just stay in the kids debate for a little bit, because Rick Santorum, I think, shows why it's not, they're not talking about economic stuff. Rick Santorum ran in 2012 as sort of that era's Lindsey Graham, right? I mean, Rick Santorum ran that time talking about Iran and in 2012, if I remember correctly. And this time he started out, I think about 1.5 years ago, talking about sort of like populist issues. And last night in that little debate, he talked about the minimum wage and how there was no workers on the stage in 2012 at the Republican convention, and nobody seemed to care. I mean, just nobody.
Right. I don't think this is going to be a salient issue for them. I mean, it remains to be seen if the Democrats, if they get in, whoever the Republican nominee is, if the Democrats are able to put the focus on these economic issues, which are always salient to the American people, obviously. I mean, this is the life we live every day, right? So I don't think that they can get away with entirely refocusing the campaign, but it's clear that they want to. And Santorum, I mean, the reception he got, and we have to remember too, and I don't think everybody out there who's listening might realize who this audience was last night. This is not the Republican Party of America. Right. That was a bunch of rich, white, older, establishment California Republicans. Those are almost literally a breed that's going extinct. That was probably all of them, as a matter of fact. That's the Republican Party. They were all there in that audience last night from California, because the California Republican Party is decimated, and it's decimated largely because of their immigrant bashing. And this is the group that's there, and they are the last people who are going to be receptive to populist arguments. And so, the fact that there was very little applause for Santorum's, sort of, I don't know, kind of right-wing social issue populism, his attempt at it, saying he wants to raise the federal minimum wage by 50 cents, which is, gee, thanks, Rick. That's, you're too kind. But, nonetheless, he was making an attempt to make an argument in that direction, and there was no reception there. But I don't think the party itself is interested in that. I mean, even the stuff that Trump says, that people say, oh, look, he's making his pot, he's going after hedge funds or whatever. Whatever. That's not why they like Trump. They like Trump because he's bashing immigrants. Let's face facts. And they like all of them because they are saying what you just said, that there's we are in a fearful, hunkered down situation here in America where we are losing our strength. We can't defend ourselves. We're refusing to confront the terrible threats that surround us from every direction. That's the world that they are. I don't know if they're enjoying it, if they believe it, or what. I mean, it's almost as if they're in a horror movie, and kind of getting off on this fear-mongering. But whatever it is, that's what's motivating the GOP base this time, not whatever mild, populist stuff that someone like Donald Trump is saying. So Santorum got nowhere with that, and in fact, they pivoted immediately back to, they're coming to get you, hide. And we've got to confront all these people. I mean, I just want to say one thing that I find interesting. You brought it up a minute ago. We are being threatened by both ISIS and by Iran.
Of course.
And there is no acknowledgement anywhere that these are two groups who are actually fighting each other.
Oh, yeah.
This isn't, there's no acknowledgement of the fact that if you were to listen to these people, you'd think they were in cahoots, right? And in their hatred of America, they have come together to try and take over our country. And in fact, they are very busy over there
fighting each other.
Themselves.
Oh, yes. I mean, literally, Iran, I think, if it wasn't for Iran 6 months ago and basically saying to the Shia in Iraq, you should probably stop them now. I think ISIS, who knows what ISIS would have been able to do at that point. All right, but I want to touch on two of the things that you brought up. One is this dystopia. I mean, it's quite clear that this notion of how we're under attack and what's going on in Syria and what's going on with ISIS is a way to talk about the Muslim apologist, if not Muslim, in the White House and his concubine, Hillary Clinton, right? I mean, that's all just a way to sort of tee that up. And I want to talk about that, but I also to sort of pivot to the tweener debate. The crowd, nobody has said what you just said about that crowd in that Reagan library, because there's a reason why every time Carly Fiorina opened her mouth, she got a huge applause. It is because literally every single person who voted for her or who has ever cast a vote for her, they were all in that building to the exclusion of anyone else, right? I mean, she ran for Senate against Barbara Boxer. Anybody who ever voted for her was probably in that room.
Absolutely. I mean, she is a home girl. This was her home stage.
Nobody mentioned that.
Of course.
Ever.
I know. Nobody mentioned it. It's like it didn't even, look, Carly, they just love her so much. And I'm going, well, yeah. But, that isn't exactly representative. And it certainly isn't representative of the people of California or even really, Republicans at large.
Of course.
She had a miserable campaign. In fact, I wrote about Carly this morning for Salon, and I put up I don't know, do you remember the Demon Sheep?
Of course.
I mean, she was a joke. I mean, it wasn't even, and this was not that long ago, folks. I mean, this was 2010. I mean, she was a miserable failure as a politician, as well as a miserable failure as a businesswoman. And that, last night, as Sam says, as you said, every single voter that loved her were there. She had the entire establishment of the Republican Party there cheering her on. And not one of the, unfortunately, part of my job is to watch that spin room afterwards, and I just about wanted to kill myself. That was probably what brought on the hangover. None of them mentioned it. No analyst who was there last night at the Reagan Library mentioned that.
Nobody.
This was Fiorina's home field.
And you bring up, I mean, it's fascinating to me because there are basically two dynamics. There were two major stories, I think, that will come out of last night, or maybe three. One is Trump will remain the front runner. Two is Jeb Bush is a disaster for the Republican Party, a disaster. And Carly Fiorina is a complete, is a Republican project. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. And I think to the extent that anything has changed with Carly Fiorina, and I want you to talk about what you wrote in your piece, because you're also the only one who, as far as I can tell, has really written about this, about what's happening with other super PACs contributing to her campaign. But I think she is a project because she is, in their eyes, the best vehicle to attack Hillary Clinton. But I think she's also becoming a project because they're starting to realize that she might be the best person to, sort of take the shine off of Trump in some way and sort of cannon fodder for Trump. And so tell us what you've been writing about in terms of Fiorina, because, I am in no way... it's very easy for her to get away with the complete fabrications and lies that she pushed last night, and stupidness in many respects, because she's in an environment where everybody is sort of wants her to succeed for these various agendas.
Yeah, I mean, a few months back, or maybe it was, just a month or so back, I've been writing about Fiorina for a while because I'm from California, so I had some familiarity with her early on. And when the latest donor, reports came out, it was revealed in there that she was getting money from super PACs. One of them was the Cruz super PAC, run by a guy named Robert Mercer, who's a very, very wealthy Texas. I think he's an oil man. I think is he the fracking guy? I don't know. There's so many. It's wealthy billionaires supporting Republicans. But in any case, there's a guy named Robert Mercer, and they had donated $500,000 to Carly's campaign, and people raised a couple of eyebrows. I don't think most people cared, but Amy Chozick, who's following the campaign for the New York Times, tweeted that she had asked Carly's financial people about these donations. That wasn't the only one, but that was the one that was flagged. And they told her that she asked the super PAC's financial people why they were donating to Carly, and they told her that they were doing it because they needed her in the race to attack Hillary Clinton. So this is an actual thing. It's not just something that that I'm being a pundit about. This was a real a New York Times reporter actually said this. Although I don't know that she's actually written about it, which I find kind of interesting.
Yeah, slightly, isn't it?
I don't know why that is, and maybe she was talking off the top of her head, but I doubt it, because it is the only thing that makes sense. Why else would a Cruz super PAC give money to Carly Fiorina? That makes no sense, and a lot of money. It's not just like some token donation to say we're with you, Carly. This is real money, and she's gotten money from a lot of sources that make you. That are questionable in why they would give her this money, and this is undoubtedly why it is. And she's very good at it. I mean, she may not be able to run a Fortune 500 company with a dam or even her own campaign, but she's really good at attacking Hillary Clinton. So, they always needed a woman in the race. Now, the other dynamic here is the media, which also needs another woman in the race so that they can promote her and feel good about her and talk about how terrific her campaign is and how great she's doing, so to offset their clear agenda against Hillary Clinton. And I don't say that as a particular Clinton advocate, except for the fact that I've seen this before, and there is something very strange that goes on with the political media and Hillary Clinton. It's just weird. So I think that they are happy to have her in there so that they can have some balance in their own minds, if not, to anybody who's watching.
And I think
she has been, and as far as the Trump thing, just to follow up, I think she has emerged as a very useful foil for Trump, and she's pretty good at that too. I mean, the way she handled him last night was, she wouldn't look at him, and she just stood, stared straight ahead, made her obviously well-prepared comment, and kind of deftly segued from something he had said to her well-prepared comment, and just let her comment just lie there. That's a very effective thing to do. So she did that. Trump sort of clumsily, he had a moment there that he could have done himself some real good, but it's impossible for him because his ego won't let him apologize. So he could have in that moment really endeared himself to some of the people who might be, kind of sickened, but they like him, but this stuff makes them uncomfortable. He could have actually helped himself, but he didn't. And so she's good at doing this particular thing. And I think that their money is well spent. I really do. I think they picked the right gal for this particular job.
And we should also say, I mean, look, there were 11 people on that debate stage, and there should have been 10. Right? I mean, and Trump tried to make that point with Rand Paul, and it was not a coincidence that he made that point when he, in addressing the attack he had gotten from, or the counterattack, if you will, from Fiorina, right? Because she is in that debate essentially because they wanted to get her into that debate. Yeah. And and there should have been only 10 people on there. At the end of the day, I don't care. These rules are completely arbitrary. But it's indicative of how much both the media and the Republican establishment wants her in there now. And I think the reason why we're seeing her so hailed after this debate, she did well. I don't think that's, I don't have a doubt about that. I don't think that her numbers are going to be as astronomical as we are led to believe, because I think it certainly helped her to have a crowd, her own sort of laugh track, applause track there in a way that nobody else had. But, at the end of the day, I don't think there's a lot of Trump supporters who are going, hey, she's really sharp. It's good to hear somebody who's not a misogynist, but also coming from that business background. I just don't think that's part of the calculation of the Trump view. I think to the extent that she took any votes from anybody last night, I think she probably took some from Ben Carson because of her willingness to completely fabricate what she supposedly saw on those Planned Parenthood videos. I mean, she basically went out there and, told a wholesale lie about what she supposedly saw in those videos, unless she has her own special copy of those videos that nobody else has access to, because there was no beating, heart-beating, full-on baby who was being kept alive for the sake of their, live limbs. I'm not sure what the theory is behind that, but and she, I think that is that endears her to the people who have been supporting Carson, which I think are the sort of the evangelicals.
Yeah, I think so too. And Carson really, I think he is the guy who lost last night. He had been rising. He'd been very popular, but up against these others in the debate, I don't think he did himself any favors. And Carly, I think, will benefit from that. I think some of the others might benefit from it too, to the extent that Carson does deflate. I think there may be some, maybe Kasich or who knows, Rubio, for whatever reasons. But I think Carly will get that. That was a very effective line. It's complete nonsense. It is nonsense. And the fervor with which she delivered it, I think, is really what. And she used the word, Hillary, I dare Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama to, do it. They love that stuff. Especially the real, hardcore anti-choice types. This is really what they live for, and this is their big issue. And unfortunately, though, I don't know how well that plays for the Republican Party in the long run. The more they emphasize this, the more people kind of go, oh, geez, are we going to be talking about, is this what we're doing, really? We're talking about body parts. I don't think that that's really a winning issue for them long term. In the short term, it will help her.
Oh, I don't think any of this.
Too, that she is a very, very hardcore social conservative. I think maybe people don't understand just how far right Carly Fiorina is. She is way out there on the right side. She's not, just the fact that she's from California and she's a nice businesswoman, maybe they think she's pragmatic and whatever. She is anything but. We found that out in 2010. And there's a good reason why she lost hugely. And it's not just because people didn't like her personality. It's because she's way out of step. And she is a hardcore social conservative on abortion. She is also, on immigration. You don't even want to think about how far right she's been. She endorsed SB 1070 in Arizona.
Wow.
When she was running for the Senate in California. That's, she got something like 10% of the Hispanic vote in California, and that's a big vote. So she is not competitive in any way as a mainstream candidate, and I think people are fooling themselves. She's another outsider on the same level that Trump and Carson are, which is to say, incompetent, inexperienced, and extreme.
Exactly.
And that is that she's going to fit right into that slot.
I think, I don't think Carson did as poorly as you did, with the loons. I think, he may have given up a couple of points to Carly Fiorina. I think, people might have wanted him to be a little more energetic, but I still think that he talks slowly. He does not really talk and introduce ideas that are highfalutin in any ways. He keeps it common sense. And I think that has a strong appeal in the Republican Party. I for one, I don't think Rubio, I don't think it's happening for him there. He may, be okay in the VP sweeps, but I think Ted Cruz was a big winner in this debate in a way that I think is underestimated because he spoke directly to camera. He was as insane as always, but I think the people who are starting to understand what needs to, all of these people go in there and they all have these sort of narrow agendas. And I think Ted Cruz is hanging back. He's going to land a couple of key sort of speeches. The interesting thing here is that for 75% of them, maybe even more, they can all just go in with prepared speeches. And they speak so little over the course of this debate that they don't really have to worry about mixing it up. The only person who really lost in a fiery, sort of explosive way, in my mind, was Jeb Bush. This guy, I honestly felt almost uncomfortable with how much Donald Trump was able to bully this guy around, like to slap him around. There was a couple of moments that really stood out to me. You've got to apologize to my wife. You've got to apologize to my wife. I'm not going to. Okay. Like that type of stuff is sort of Dukakis level of women is in an arena that is, and I love Michael Dukakis, but to do it, in that arena where all Jeb Bush went in with one agenda, with two agendas, I should say. One agenda was to catch Trump as a liar on that whole Florida casino thing, which they completely botched, it seems to me.
Yep.
And we'll talk about that in a second. And the other one was to show that he was tough enough, man enough, in the Republican debate to stand up to Donald Trump. And he failed miserably on that. He failed it even like when he was supposedly mocking Donald Trump with that Energizer line. You said it right. Carly Fiorina, when she attacked Trump, she didn't even look at Trump. When Jeb Bush made that joke about Energizer, right? I've got more energy. He, instead of making that to the audience, which is the only way that he could make that self-effacing joke, he actually made it to Trump as if he was paying tribute to Trump. It was unbelievable. It was like, I kept thinking of, I don't know where I saw this, but the one where the orangutans or the gorillas, when they want to show that they're being deferential, they put out their hand, and like hold it up in front of like the king gorilla. And I kept, that's what Jeb Bush looked like to me all night. He just kept putting his hand up in front and saying, Donald, have I made you laugh today? I saw this dynamic in like junior high and high school. It was really astonishing.
I will never get that picture out of my head now. That's hilarious. And you're so right. I couldn't believe that he said the "I want you to apologize to my wife" line, knowing that there was a chance that Trump was just going to say no. And of course there was a chance. Trump doesn't apologize. He's never apologized. So what was he going to do then? Punch him out? I didn't get, what was the follow-up? What would have been a follow-up? Nothing. Don't bring that up. If you're not prepared to go.
Right. You say, like, I know you won't apologize to my wife because you're a despicable human being. But, you say that, but this was just, it was unbelievable. And then Trump comes back with, I hear a lot of good things about your wife. It sounded like Trump was going to say, like, maybe I'll date her. Like literally, it was unbelievable.
I know. And this was his demeanor through the entire debate, Jeb, was just, I do not, by the way, I've been writing this from the beginning. When he first started, I said, Jeb reminds me of Fred Thompson, somebody who everybody, thought was going to come in there, was going to dominate, was the natural guy. Everybody would see him as the natural successor. And of course, Thompson pointed out, But the idea being that there's always this person there, that they have an image in their head that has absolutely nothing to do with the actual person. Jeb Bush does not seem to me to be a guy who wants to be president. I do not get that feeling from him. I never have. I don't know what happened. They had a family meeting, and they said, Jeb, you've got to redeem the family name. Daddy, Poppy screwed it up, and then God knows what Junior did. Please get in there and save us. I don't know what happened, but I do not get the feeling that this guy wants to be president. He is absolutely, the energy thing that Trump talks about is absolutely real, but it's not because he's a, quote, low-energy person. It's because he just can't seem to summon up any passion for doing this. He does not seem to want to do this.
I have been convinced.
I thought it showed last night.
I have been convinced from the beginning that it was an obligation to George P. That for Jeb, his role as a father, his responsibility as a father in the Bush family is to take George P., who is now, I don't know, a Texas water commissioner or something like that, which is actually a fairly powerful position in Texas, to take him around the country and introduce him to donors. And then what sort of like bizarrely happened, and I bet you George P. is probably working on the PAC, that has the $1 million for what. And I'm also not convinced that they didn't run that money through a PAC. Because in the back of Jeb's mind, he knew, I don't want to be so committed that I've got all the money. We'll keep it with the PAC. They don't necessarily have to be for me at the end of the day anyways. Because, a lot of people are talking, it's genius that they've put all of the mechanisms in the PAC. Well, that to me is a sign also of not being, fully committed. I don't want this all tied around me. Let it be an entity that can actually exist, even if I'm not there. But you have all this money there. The question is at what point does this guy drop out? Because, I went back and looked at the polls. Mitt Romney scored in double digits only once in May of 2011 in a Zogby poll, and that was an outlier. In every other poll, starting in the first quarter, starting in 2010, he never was in single digits. So, it's one thing for people to say Donald Trump's going to flame out or everybody gets their couple of minutes in a flame. But the bottom line is their establishment candidate has been in single digits in polling for months now. And that is unprecedented. That part's not. Mitt Romney was never in that situation. And Mitt Romney, he had to go well into the primaries to wrap this thing up. They've got a major, major problem on their hands. And I think people like Ted Cruz are hanging back there, and you can almost see it in their debate strategy. I'm just going to hang back. I'm going to lock things up with certain constituencies, and I'm going to wait. And I'm not convinced that the Cruz people aren't pushing Fiorina because they think they can take some steam out of Donald Trump.
Well, that may be true, and they certainly will find her useful. And she's not, really a threat to the constituencies that Cruz is going after. You're absolutely right. Cruz is doing a very, very running a very strategic race. He's not just, running around Iowa and New Hampshire and, giving odd speeches, although of course he's doing that. They all have to. But he is, and it's been interesting because he and Carson have been fighting it out for the evangelical, for the evangelical vote. This is, I've been following this sort of, this is kind of a shadow campaign. People underestimate, I think, always how important the evangelical vote is to the Republican primaries. They are the foot soldiers. They're like the unions for the Republicans. This is where they get the vote out. This is where they get the word out, is through these evangelical churches. And they're very, very powerful, particularly in the early states. And so it's been an interesting race so far for that constituency because many of them have oddly been interested in Trump. They've been sort of going along with him in this early wave. And that shouldn't surprise people as much as it does, because Trump actually put a lot of money into evangelical causes going all the way back to 2012. He appeared at Liberty University long before Bernie Sanders did. And they had him there, and he's Donald. He's not, and he should have had Jerry Falwell Jr., give him some tips about how to talk about the Bible. But there are, one of the things that this particular group likes is they really like being pandered to, even if it's patently, hypocritical and obvious that the person doesn't know what they're talking about. They like that. And Donald Trump has made that outreach. He has actually he's giving money to a lot of evangelical organizations. And so it's not completely, shocking that some of these people would be for him. I don't think that will hold because he's clearly not a reasonable evangelical, candidate. But the others that have been circling around that same group, Walker, Cruz, Huckabee, Santorum, who's really not even a factor anymore, and Carson, those are the other four who are, kind of vying for that group, and I think assuming that whoever is with Trump today, that those are going to fall out and find a real evangelical candidate. That is a very interesting race, and Walker was supposed to be the guy because he is an evangelical. He's the real thing, and he's from Wisconsin, close to Iowa. He's spent a lot of time there. And he supposedly had a lot of serious evangelical bona fides, and he was going to be able to capture that group without having to sacrifice his general election process the way that Mitt Romney did. That has not worked out because in the course of his his tenure as governor of Wisconsin, he has had to deviate a tiny bit on his evangelical positions and then go back, and so they suspect him of being a flip-flopper, and he has not been able to capture that group. Cruz is the guy. Carson has, because he's a genuine, conservative Christian, and I think that they genuinely believe him when he's talking to them, and he's been able to make inroads, but Cruz is working it very, very hard. And he is also the real thing. He's a real evangelical Christian. His father is a hardcore fire and brimstone evangelical preacher. And Cruz talks that talk very effectively. So that whole game that's being played there among that particular subset of the Republican primary, and it's a very important one, is quite interesting to watch. And I think that you might be right. I think that Cruz is the one. He has been very strategic about trying to line up everybody, every right-wing faction. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this Planned Parenthood government shutdown gambit. Cruz is going to be running that. Along with some friends of his. And I don't know if it will work, but it gives him a platform to really make a splash among that group and see if he can maybe solidify it. But it's fascinating, and I think you're right. I mean, he can be very, very effective with that group. He's a very polished speaker. If he can last long enough for the debates to become a little bit more reasonable between, get rid of some of the outliers, Christie.
Well, I'll tell you something. When he said Rosa Parks last night, I mean, I have to say, about 2 years ago, I was saying, it's possible to get a lunatic like Ted Cruz because there's going to be so many people who are going to run for this. We could be in that era now where the margins have taken over the Republican Party. And the longer this goes, and the establishment can't seem to find somebody who is going to be the heir apparent to Jeb Bush, because it's quite clear. I mean, it's not just that Donald Trump is a big force. I mean, I suspect, frankly, that he doesn't want to be president and he's going to step down. But it's that he has basically killed Jeb Bush's prospects. I mean, just really decimated them. And I'm not convinced that Donald Trump, sometime in February doesn't say I'm going to appoint Ted Cruz the president. And it basically says okay, I'm going to drop out because there's somebody in my family has an illness, and I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to say what it is or who it is, but I owe it to the country and to them because I love America and I want to make America great again. And so I'm going to have to drop out. And he does, and he basically says, but I'm going to be Ted Cruz's campaign chairman. And I dub him the next president. And that to me is because I thought a guy like John Kasich would sort of become the establishment candidate. I think they would like him to be, but I think maybe I am biased just because Kasich comes off as a sort of, even though I know intellectually where he stands on this stuff, but he comes off as like a non sort of a-hole and lunatic. And I think maybe that's just my bias because I don't realize that, like, you know, the people voting in this primary are so not like a normal human being that they can't even rally around John Kasich in a time of emergency. All right, I want to leave this for a moment because I wanted to talk to you about what's happening with Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, because obviously that's sort of in some ways the flip side of this coin. You know, we talked about how sort of the debate, all of these Republican candidates are setting up this notion that we're living in this sort of dystopia that is, you know, we're all living under Sharia law, or we're in the pre-Sharia law stage of this epic battle that's going on. And I think, you know, part of that is, you know, as an attack on Hillary Clinton, because I think it sort of ties into Benghazi in some weird ways, and the fact that she was at the State Department, and et cetera, et cetera. But the weird thing that's happening, I think, is that in the Democratic race, they shortened the debate schedule, they tightened it up, they narrowed it, they put all the debates on the weekends. I think the idea was, or largely the idea was, like, we want to, you know, make it sort of less contentious for Hillary because the Republicans are shortening their debate schedule. And of course, that is blown up on the Republicans in a large way. I think they'd be much better off if there were, you know, 40 debates so that each one wasn't this sort of spectacle where 30 million people watch or whatever. I don't know what the ratings were last night, but I imagine they're pretty darn close for the first couple hours like they were the first night. And now the Democrats have this problem, both, you know, I think, you know, I've been pretty upfront about my being very supportive of Bernie Sanders' campaign, but I want ultimately the Democratic nominee to beat Ted Cruz, and I think it's hurting Hillary Clinton as well to not have debates right now because, you know, it leaves this vacuum. And I think that vacuum is very difficult for the Democrats, broadly speaking, and specifically for Hillary Clinton. And you're seeing some of that panic now. I think there was this email that was sent around by David Brock's PAC comparing Bernie Sanders to Hugo Chavez and to Jeremy Corbyn, and that's obviously for the consumption of the media, but all that says to the media, all they see is the meta story that, wow, they're legitimately afraid of Bernie Sanders.
I know. I did not understand that at all, and I have admiration for what David Brock has done with Media Matters, and I know that they are, this group that he heads. Is it called Correct the Record? Or,
yes.
Yeah. That is working as an outside entity, a super PAC to support Hillary Clinton. I'm sure they're going to do very good work when we get up against when Democrats are fighting actual Republicans, because David Brock is reputed and is a very, very tough fighter. This was entirely inappropriate, and absolutely, I don't think it was correct to portray Sanders in the way that this letter did. I don't know what the point of it was, and you're absolutely right. It made it backfired, because it essentially says that the Clinton campaign or Clinton supporters are truly afraid, and so they're going after Bernie Sanders. I honestly, I have no idea what's going on in the Clinton campaign. I have no contacts in there, but I would be very surprised if that was true. I mean, if you look at Nate Silver's analysis of the polling and everything in the race, Clinton, I think, must realize that it's still Bernie's to win and hers to lose, and I don't think that is. I doubt that they're panicking. And moreover, as far as the debates are concerned, it's absolutely crazy, because Clinton's actually a good debater. There's nothing to fear for having her debate. this back and forth that she would have with Sanders, and I assume they'd invite O'Malley and Webb and whatever the other, maybe they'd invite Joe Biden without even, him declaring.
Right.
Since they put him in all the polling anyway, he might as well be there. But it would be useful, I think, for the country to see the contrast.
Exactly.
This group of serious candidates, all of whom are conversant in the issues, can speak intelligently about what's going on in the world. And even if you don't agree with them, you're going to see that these are serious people as opposed to the, clown bus of Donald Trump and company over on the other side. And I don't understand why Democrats wouldn't want to start doing that. They're in a terrific position, I think, and I'm trying not to be too.
I agree with you totally
about
about
it seems obvious to me that they are the group that is, they're coming up with they're having a rather stately campaign around the issues by comparison to this freak show where they're insulting people's looks and talking about rapists and, this crazy stuff. So I think people would be calmed by seeing a debate between Clinton and Sanders.
It's a huge missed opportunity. I mean, can you imagine if there was a Democratic debate, let's say this coming Tuesday, and you'd have Clinton and Sanders and O'Malley and Jim Webb debating over things like what's the best proposal for debt-free college? What do we need to do? What's the best tax plan to provide equality? What would we do for criminal reform? What do we need to do to create more jobs? And a sensible debate as to, how large is the threat to, that ISIS pose? What is the next step? How important is this Iran agreement to the future of the security of both and stabilizing the Middle East and how this represents perhaps a new era where we can leave the sort of the havoc that we've wreaked behind. You compare that to what we just saw last night and the pressure and the level of scrutiny, but now you have these Republicans are being judged in sort of like in a vacuum, in sort of like a hermetically sealed world where like all you have access to is this insanity. So all of a sudden, John Kasich looks like actually a reasonable guy because he's on stage with a bunch of lunatics. It's like,
yeah, I mean, they're laying out the environment. They're laying out the narrative that is going to exist in 2016. And I've always known they wanted to lay out a narrative of this, America is a dystopian hellscape because we've been run by, a Muslim plant for the last 8 years, and now we're going to put in, a shrieking feminazi to fulfill his evil vision. This is what they want to run on. I don't understand why the Democrats want to allow that to take hold in people's minds. I mean, this is all they're seeing. Nobody watches Hillary Clinton's speeches, and I'm not saying that they should necessarily, or Sanders either, for that matter. That they're doing the campaigning in the states where that's, that they're doing what they have to do. But this broad national kind of discussion that is beginning to take hold about the dystopian hellscape of America, led by Donald Trump and jumped on eagerly by all the other Republicans, is not going to be useful for the Democrats if it becomes too, if it really takes hold. I mean, it's exciting, it's dramatic, it makes for a good show, but ultimately, I think one of the things that they are mistaking, the Republicans are, is the old, Ronald Reagan, for all of his faults, did understand one thing. Americans do want to have hope that things are getting better. They want to believe that America's, essentially a good country and that, they're trying to do the right thing. And, all of that is highly debatable. But I think that is something that people want to hear, and I don't think that they're hearing it anywhere at the moment. And
which is not to say that they would hear it necessarily with the Democrats, but it's like, I play softball up in, Prospect Park up here, and you can see multiple sort of like softball diamonds or baseball diamonds. And it just, in my mind, I just sort of like imagine like looking to one side, seeing the Republicans there, actually like flinging their own feces at each other, and then just watching the other side, and you just see a softball game. And it's like, you know, you're denying the American public the opportunity to sort of compare and contrast what's going on in these two parties. And I am quite sure that a significant percentage of the 24 million who tuned into the first one and tuned in for the second one are looking in the same way they would a freak show. But the problem is, if you spend all your time at the circus and you never look outside the tent, suddenly that becomes normalized after a while, right? Yeah. I mean, if you work at the circus, it's not that strange to see, the whatever it is, the high wire act or the three-headed man or whatever it is. And I think it's just a huge mistake of the Democrats not to step up. But that was their sort of, I guess, their plan.
Well, they're trying to be protective, and I get that, Clinton, the front runners never want to debate, right? Because they figure they've got nothing, they have nowhere to go but down. So they're not going to eagerly jump on the opportunity. But considering the way that this race is shaping up, and considering the fact, we are getting close now. It's September. The campaign is fully engaged. I think that it's time for the Democrats to start having a presence. The other part of this, and I think it's really important, and I would hope that Clinton gets this, is that until she is able to appear before the American people unfiltered by the media, this image of her that's being put out there of being, as Bob Shrum generously put it the other day, she's cold and old, thanks with friends like Shrum, she doesn't need any enemies. But, so they're out there, this narrative of her is out there, and the media really loves it. And she needs, hey, Hillary, I'm here to advise you. It's a bit presumptuous of me, but I do think that it's an opportunity for her at this point to try and change this media narrative that is taking hold. It always goes back and forth with her. This goes on and on and on year after year.
Well, but here's the mistake.
We love her, we hate her, it goes back. And I think she knows that, and she's pretty well, she's accepting of that roller coaster that she's always on. But it's probably time to step out of that.
I think, the mistake that people are making, I think, that the sort of the media consultants and the consultants are making is the same one that they made about, it's sort of the flip side of what they made about Trump. And that is that just because she is well known, it doesn't mean that she doesn't have to sort of caretake her narrative. In other words, with Trump, the idea was that all the data journalists were saying 3 months ago, like, look at his unfavorables. This guy, everybody knows who Donald Trump is. He's not going to be able to move those things. Well, you know what? If you have the opportunity to control the media platform on a day in, day out basis, it turns out you can actually change that narrative about, how you're defined in the media. And the flip side of that is also true. If you're not putting yourself out there, you're creating a vacuum, and there's so much desire to create a narrative that, and I don't think that it's, something that she couldn't overcome in the end. But, I really want the Republican Party to be vanquished. And so I need to see, forgive me, people lean in to this a little bit more. But, Digby, always a pleasure, and I thank you for coming the day after such a traumatic event, as we all experienced last night.
Yes, it wasn't easy. I need to go now and have a full colonic and a 2-hour steam bath just to get all the just sweat the alcohol out of my system.
That's right. Time for a cleanse.
Yes, a total cleanse.
Digby, always a pleasure. The blog is Hullabaloo, and of course you can catch Heather's work also on salon.com. We will put a link to both of those places on our blog at majority.fm. Thanks a lot, Digby.
Thanks, Sam.
Bye-bye.